Well, of course, as you would expect, it's quite a vast subject. When I've looked at all these different things initially individually, so I take Christianity, I take other religions, I take Egypt, I take Babylon, I take Sumeria, I take the Greeks, take the Church of Rome, etc. And initially believed that they were all separate entities doing their own certain things, leaving their own fingerprint on history. But what I've soon found out is that all of these things are connected. They're connected by theme, and by that I mean esoteric knowledge that has been left for us to decipher in cryptic ways, but also by mathematics.
For over a century, this book remained hidden, its wisdom buried, its secrets guarded by mystics, sages, and initiates. Inside lies knowledge so profound, it reveals the nature of life, consciousness, and the divine spark within us all. But if its truths were ever fully known, they could shake the very foundations of society. Are you ready to uncover what they never wanted you to find? How the New World Order reshaped society. Hermetic at its core and undeniably alchemical, this book explores the philosophy of etymology, revealing how words encode profound meanings. Our ancestors knew these meanings intimately. They understood the power of language, not just as a means of communication, but as a gateway to spiritual knowledge. But then, everything changed. With the advent of a new world order, the calendar was altered, the year was redefined, and even the names of the gods were rewritten. Languages were reshaped, restructured, and repurposed, severing the connection between words and their ancient meanings. Why? Because when you take away someone's native language, you strip them of their history. You gain control over their narrative. You have the power to redefine their world. This was not merely an act of conquest, but a calculated erasure of sacred knowledge, knowledge that, if understood, could illuminate the true nature of existence. It's an old teaching, one that resonates through the ages. Those who seek the esoteric truths behind theology, philosophy, and the art of wordsmithing will find that this book is unparalleled. Especially for those rooted in the West, coming from Abrahamic traditions, whether Christian, Muslim, or Judaic, this ancient text sheds light on the origins of beliefs that have shaped entire civilizations. But this knowledge is not for the faint of heart. It challenges the accepted narratives and demands an open mind. It calls for the courage to question everything you've ever been taught about the nature of God, existence, and yourself. The calculated subversion of truth. Everything we think of as religion today, under the influence of the Vaticanized Roman Empire, is a subversion of the truth. Not the truth itself, but a cleverly constructed version designed to maintain power and control. But don't get me wrong, this isn't about discrediting anyone's faith. In fact, understanding the roots of these teachings can deepen one's faith. It can enhance one's spiritual journey if one is ready and willing to confront the uncomfortable truths buried beneath centuries of dogma. The primitive Christians, known as the Essenes, understood this. They held profound esoteric beliefs that emphasized personal transformation and divine realization. They saw spiritual texts as metaphors for inner alchemy, much like the Taoist practice of circulating energy through the body to achieve enlightenment. They realized that Christ was not merely a historical figure, but a substance, a sacred oil or ointment hidden within the human body. They believed that this holy oil resided in the spinal cord, connecting to every nerve within the body, flowing like a divine river from the upper brain to nourish the entire being. This river was the very essence of life, a mystical energy that the ancients allegorized through scriptures written in Hebrew and Greek. To them, these texts were not historical accounts, but allegories, parables, and fables woven around the human body, fearfully and wonderfully made. a secret that transcends culture. But all of this changed under the rule of Constantine, a Roman emperor whose ambition for power led him to manipulate spiritual teachings for political control. The Council of Nicaea marked the birth of institutionalized Christianity, where symbolic wisdom was replaced with rigid dogma. Concepts that once pointed to the divine potential within each person were externalized, reshaping spirituality into a tool for authority and obedience. To understand the profound impact of Constantine and the Council of Nicaea on the evolution of Christian doctrine, we must first explore the spiritual landscape of the first 3 centuries of the Christian era. During this period, the Essenes held beliefs that were radically different from what later became mainstream Christian doctrine. They viewed spiritual texts as allegorical, using symbolic language to describe the mysteries of the human body and the cosmos. For them, spirituality was deeply connected to self-realization and inner transformation, a perspective that would later be obscured by institutionalized religion. However, as Christianity began to spread, it became entangled with political power. The persecution of the Essenes and other early Christian mystics by the religious authorities grew increasingly severe. To avoid persecution, they met in secret, using the symbol of the fish, a coded reference to the astrological age of Pisces and the spiritual teachings associated with it. However, this underground movement would soon face a monumental transformation that would change the course of religious history. In 325 AD, Constantine, the Roman emperor who played a pivotal role in shaping Christianity as we know it, convened the Council of Nicaea. Constantine was not a Christian by faith, but a shrewd political leader seeking to unify his empire under a single religion. His motivations were not purely spiritual but strategic. By consolidating religious beliefs, he aimed to solidify his political power and control over a fragmented empire. Constantine's personal history is marked by ruthless ambition. He murdered his own mother and boiled his wife in oil, crimes so heinous that the priests of his time told him that redemption would require a long cycle of reincarnations. Unwilling to accept this karmic consequence, Constantine sought to circumvent cosmic law by redefining doctrine itself. This marks the beginning of what many esoteric scholars call the rise of the Antichrist, a force that distorts spiritual truth for political gain. The Council of Nicaea was a tumultuous gathering filled with intense debates and political maneuvering. After months of conflict, often resolved by narrow votes, the council canonized what would become the Christian Bible. The selection process was not a quest for divine truth, but a political decision designed to create a unified religious narrative. Manuscripts that aligned with Constantine's vision were declared the Word of God, while those that contradicted it, particularly those containing mystical or Gnostic teachings, were excluded. This selective editing radically transformed Christian doctrine. Essential teachings that emphasized inner divinity, spiritual elevation, and self-realization were removed or reinterpreted. This is evident in the exclusion of texts like the Gospel of Thomas, which states, "The kingdom of God is within you." Such teachings threatened the authority of an externalized religious hierarchy, so they were systematically erased. The manipulation did not end there. The council also addressed theological debates that seem trivial today, but had profound implications for spiritual symbolism. One such debate centered on whether angels have wings. By a narrow majority, it was decided that angels did possess wings, thus cementing a literal interpretation of celestial beings. This decision obscured the earlier symbolic understanding of angels as messengers of higher consciousness, energies that ascend and descend the spinal column, akin to the Kundalini serpent in Eastern mysticism. This reinterpretation was part of a broader strategy to externalize spirituality, shifting focus from internal transformation to external worship. In doing so, the Council effectively distanced believers from the esoteric teachings that emphasized personal divine realization. Spirituality was no longer an inward journey, but a matter of dogma, ritual, and obedience to religious authority. This shift is particularly evident when examining the interpretation of crucifixion, which we'll keep deciphering later on. In esoteric Christianity, the crucifixion symbolizes the death of the ego and the elevation of consciousness. The cross represents the intersection of earthly and divine energies within the human body, particularly at the heart center, where love and compassion reside. This aligns with the Taoist concept of energy ascending the spine to the crown, symbolizing spiritual enlightenment. However, the Council of Nicaea transformed this metaphorical teaching into a historical event, emphasizing physical suffering and sacrificial atonement. This narrative served to instill fear and guilt, making followers more dependent on the Church for salvation. The emphasis on sin and redemption diverted attention from the transformative power within each individual. This distortion isn't new. This distortion of spiritual truth was not unique to Christianity. It mirrors similar transformations in other ancient traditions where mystical teachings were institutionalized. In Taoist alchemy, for example, the practice of internal transformation, known as Nei Dan, or internal alchemy, aims to transmute bodily energies into spiritual enlightenment. This involves cultivating Jing, essence, Qi, vital energy, and Shen, spirit, a process symbolized by the ascent of energy through the spine. The similarities don't end there, though. The symbolism of crucifixion as spiritual elevation also parallels the Taoist microcosmic orbit, where energy ascends the spine and descends along the front of the body. Both traditions emphasize the union of opposites, yin and yang, human and divine. Yet, by externalizing the crucifixion, the Council of Nicaea effectively severed this esoteric link, reducing a profound spiritual teaching to a historical event. This historical manipulation has far-reaching implications. By externalizing spiritual symbols and narratives, the Council of Nicaea laid the foundation for a religion based on dogma and authority rather than personal transformation and divine realization. It shifted the focus from the internal process of spiritual elevation to an externalized salvation dependent on ritual, obedience, and hierarchy. Yet, the esoteric teachings were not entirely lost. They survived in mystical traditions like Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and Eastern philosophies. They were preserved in symbols, metaphors, and allegories, awaiting rediscovery by those willing to look beyond the literal narrative. Today, these teachings are resurfacing, inviting us to reinterpret ancient symbols with fresh eyes and to reclaim the transformative power within us. The story of Constantine and the Council of Nicaea is not merely a historical event, but a cautionary tale about the power of narrative and the consequences of externalizing spiritual truth. It challenges us to look beyond dogma, to seek the esoteric wisdom hidden in ancient texts, and to rediscover the path of inner transformation. So, in this book we mentioned in the beginning, we learned that the Essenes understood the etymology of words, knowing that Christos in Greek means oil or anointing. They were aware that the secretions from the brain, specifically the grey matter from the cerebrum, were the source of human consciousness. They saw the spinal cord as the River Jordan and the sacral plexus at the base of the spine as the Dead Sea. This allegory symbolized the journey of the sacred oil from the brain down the spinal cord, where it could be either lost or transformed into something divine. This knowledge was preserved through symbolism and passed down through secret societies and mystical traditions. It was hidden in plain sight, within religious texts that were never meant to be interpreted literally. Instead, they were esoteric maps guiding the seeker to inner enlightenment. But when the power structures of the world realized the implications of this knowledge, they took swift action to bury it. The sacred meanings were concealed, encoded, and then distorted, ensuring that only the initiated would have the keys to decode these ancient mysteries. Why did they hide this knowledge? Because it reveals that the temple of God is not a physical building, but the human body itself. Every character, every place, and every event described in the Holy Scriptures symbolizes aspects of the human anatomy and the spiritual journey within. For example, Golgotha, the place of the skull where the crucifixion took place, is actually a metaphor for the human skull. This is where the sacred oil is crucified, meaning it is magnified in power, not killed. It then ascends to the pineal gland, activating spiritual enlightenment and connecting the individual to divine consciousness. This is the sacred secret, the secret of the Christos, the anointing oil within us all. It is the hidden spiritual knowledge they tried to erase. But even though they tried, the truth remains, waiting to be rediscovered by those who dare to seek it. This is just the beginning. The deeper we go into this ancient text, the more layers of symbolism we will peel away. It challenges the very fabric of what we've been taught about history, religion, and human potential. But the question is, are you ready to journey into this hidden knowledge? Are you ready to uncover the truth they tried to hide? The secret of Christos. Fantastic. Then, let me tell you that the secret of the Christos delves into the esoteric interpretation of Christ's journey, exploring it not merely as a historical narrative, but as an alchemical and spiritual process occurring within the human body. The text explains that this sacred oil originates in the brain, specifically from the pituitary and pineal glands, and travels down the spinal cord to the sacral region. If conserved rather than wasted, for example through excessive sensual indulgence, this secretion undergoes a transformation and ascends back up the spine, symbolizing spiritual ascension and enlightenment. This process is metaphorically linked to the narrative of Christ's crucifixion, death, and resurrection. Alchemical transformation and spiritual ascension. The author explores the alchemical symbolism in this journey, referring to the chemical wedding that takes place when the secretions from the pituitary, associated with the feminine energy, the Mary aspect, and the pineal gland, the masculine energy, the Joseph aspect, merge. This union creates a new substance that is less dense and begins to rise up the spinal column. This is compared to mercury in a thermometer, symbolizing the rise of spiritual consciousness. When this sacred oil reaches the medulla oblongata, referred to as Golgotha, or the place of the skull, it is refined and transformed into a higher state of consciousness, paralleling Christ's crucifixion and resurrection. This alchemical process is described as a 1,000-fold increase in power, representing the enlightenment and awakening of the individual. Esoteric symbolism and the human body as a temple. The text also delves into the allegorical interpretation of biblical scriptures, asserting that the Bible encodes advanced spiritual and biological truths about the human body. Imagine for a moment that the place of crucifixion, Golgotha, is not merely a distant hill where a man was nailed to a wooden cross. What if Golgotha, meaning the place of the skull, is a map pointing inward to the very structure of your own head? What if the story of Christ's crucifixion is not about death, but about the ultimate resurrection of your own divine consciousness. The philosopher Carl Jung often spoke of symbols as bridges between the conscious and unconscious mind. He believed that myths and religious stories were not just tales of the past, but mirrors reflecting our own spiritual journey. To Jung, the cross was not just a historical instrument of torture, it was a symbol of transformation, of the union between opposites, life and death, body and spirit. When you look at the cross this way, it becomes a doorway, not to suffering, but to awakening. The story of Christ's crucifixion at Golgotha is rich with hidden meaning. Golgotha, the place of the skull, hints at a location within us all. It is the skull itself, the human head, housing the most mysterious and powerful organ of all, the brain. Within this skull lies the pineal gland, a tiny pine cone-shaped structure that ancient philosophers and mystics called the seat of the soul. In the esoteric tradition, it is known as the throne of God, the place where divine consciousness awakens. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche spoke of this in his concept of the Übermensch, the overman who transcends ordinary human limitations to achieve divine consciousness. Nietzsche's overman is not a conqueror of others, but a master of himself, one who has crucified his ego and risen as his divine self. In this sense, Christ is the ultimate Übermensch, the model of spiritual ascension. In Taoist alchemy, this ascent is known as the microcosmic orbit, where the refined energy travels up the governing vessel, along the spine, and down the conception vessel, along the front of the body. This circular flow of energy purifies the mind and body, leading to spiritual enlightenment. The symbolism is almost identical to the depiction of Christ on the cross, his head bowed as if the energy has reached the crown, symbolizing divine realization. Likewise, the French philosopher René Descartes was captivated by the pineal gland. He believed it was the principal seat of the soul and the place where thoughts are formed. Descartes saw it as the bridge between the physical and the spiritual, the point where our material existence connects with the divine. But why did he fixate on this tiny gland? What did he see that modern science overlooks? In this hidden chamber, something miraculous happens. The pituitary gland, associated with feminine energy, the Mary within us all, secretes a milky white substance. The pineal gland, representing masculine energy, the Joseph aspect, releases a golden fluid. When these two sacred secretions meet, they create the Christos, the anointing oil that holds the power of resurrection. This oil then travels down the spinal column, the tree of life within us, descending to the sacral region. Here it rests, awaiting transformation. But not everyone experiences this resurrection. The oil is sensitive. It can be squandered through excessive sensual indulgence, or it can be transmuted and preserved through discipline and spiritual practice. If conserved, it begins its return journey, ascending the spinal column, just as Christ ascended after his crucifixion. The all-seeing eye. In ancient Egypt, the pineal gland was symbolized by the eye of Horus, the all-seeing eye that perceives beyond physical reality. The Egyptians knew that this gland governed spiritual vision, intuition, and higher wisdom. It was considered the gateway to other dimensions, to divine knowledge. This is why the Eye of Horus appears on the Great Seal of the United States, floating above the unfinished pyramid, symbolizing the incomplete spiritual journey awaiting completion through divine awakening. The pineal gland is also associated with the crown chakra in Eastern philosophy, the 1,000-petaled lotus that blooms when one reaches enlightenment. When the sacred oil activates the pineal gland, it illuminates the mind, leading to a state of Christ consciousness, a state of unity with the divine. This is the meaning of being anointed, of becoming Christos. It is the realization that you are the temple of God and that the kingdom of heaven is within you. the miracles. Similarly, Christ's miracles have long been celebrated as divine acts that defy the laws of nature, turning water into wine, healing the sick, walking on water, and even raising the dead. These stories have inspired faith and devotion for centuries. But what if they were more than just supernatural events? What if they were symbolic teachings meant to reveal the hidden potential within each of us? In esoteric traditions, Christ's miracles are seen as metaphors for spiritual transformation. They symbolize the awakening of divine power within human consciousness. This interpretation does not diminish their wonder, but invites us to explore a deeper meaning, one that connects the miracles to ancient wisdom about the mind, spirit, and the nature of reality itself. Take, for example, the transformation of water into wine at the wedding at Cana. On the surface, it is a display of divine power, a testament to Christ's authority over the material world. But in mystical teachings, water represents the lower mind, fluid, changeable, and bound to earthly desires. Wine, on the other hand, symbolizes divine consciousness, rich, intoxicating, and transformative. The miracle, therefore, is an allegory for the alchemical process of spiritual evolution, where the base elements of human nature are transmuted into divine essence. This interpretation aligns with ancient alchemical teachings that speak of turning lead into gold, not as a literal transformation of metals, but as a metaphor for spiritual ascension. Just as water is elevated to wine, the human soul can be elevated to divine consciousness through inner transformation. Christ's miracle at Cana thus becomes a teaching about awakening to higher states of being. The healing miracles carry a similar symbolism. When Christ restores sight to the blind or makes the lame walk, he is not merely curing physical ailments, but awakening spiritual perception. In esoteric thought, blindness symbolizes ignorance, a lack of spiritual insight. To heal blindness is to illuminate the mind, to open the inner eye to divine truth. Likewise, the lame are those who are spiritually paralyzed, unable to move forward on their path of awakening. By making them walk, Christ is showing us how to overcome our limitations and move toward enlightenment. Walking on water is perhaps one of the most famous miracles, often seen as a demonstration of Christ's mastery over the physical world. But on a deeper level, it symbolizes mastery over the emotional realm, which in mystical teachings is represented by water. The sea, with its constant motion and depths, symbolizes the turbulent human emotions that can drown us if we are not anchored in spiritual awareness. By walking on water, Christ demonstrates how to rise above these emotions through faith and divine consciousness. And then there is the raising of Lazarus from the dead, a miracle that goes beyond physical resurrection to symbolize the awakening of the soul. In esoteric traditions, death represents spiritual ignorance, a state of being asleep to one's divine nature. Lazarus, lying in the tomb, symbolizes humanity trapped in the darkness of illusion. When Christ calls him to rise, he is calling all of us to awaken to the truth of who we really are, eternal beings of light and consciousness. This interpretation is echoed in ancient mystery schools that taught the process of spiritual initiation as a symbolic death and rebirth. Just as Lazarus emerged from the tomb, initiates were said to emerge from darkness into the light of divine wisdom. Christ's miracle is a parable of spiritual awakening, a reminder that death is not the end but a gateway to higher consciousness. But why were these deeper meanings hidden? Why were the miracles taught as literal events rather than symbolic teachings? Some say it was to protect esoteric wisdom from being misunderstood or misused. Others believe it was to maintain the power of religious institutions by keeping spiritual knowledge in the hands of the few. Yet the truth has always been there, hidden in plain sight for those who seek it. Christ's miracles were not just historical events, but timeless teachings about human potential and divine realization. They reveal the power within each of us to transform our minds, heal our spirits, and rise above the limitations of the material world. The secret is not just in the miracles themselves, but in the consciousness that made them possible. Christ was showing us the power of divine awareness, the same power that lies dormant within each of us. By understanding the hidden meaning of his miracles, we begin to understand the secret of the Christos, the path of awakening the divine within. This is the knowledge they tried to hide, the spiritual truth that empowers each of us to perform our own miracles. It is the revelation that Christ's journey was not just his alone, but a path available to all who dare to seek the truth beyond appearances. The miracles are our inheritance, the promise that we too can transform water into wine, heal the blind, walk on water, and rise from the dead, if only we remember who we truly are. The path of Christ as a spiritual blueprint. Christ's path is a blueprint for spiritual awakening. It is a journey of internal alchemy, where the human body undergoes a transformation leading to higher consciousness and divine union. This perspective invites readers to look beyond dogmatic interpretations and explore the mystical dimensions of Christ's teachings. Words have power, not just in the way they shape our thoughts, but in the way they carry the weight of ancient truths, hidden beneath layers of time and translation. What if I told you that the word crucifixion doesn't mean what you think it means? What if the story of Christ on the cross is not about suffering and punishment, but about an elevation, a journey to divine realization? What if the cross itself is a symbol of spiritual transformation, a gateway to limitless consciousness? To uncover this hidden meaning, we must look beyond the surface of words. We must dig into their etymology, peeling back centuries of translation, doctrine, and dogma. Only then can we see the esoteric truths they conceal. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein once said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." By understanding the true meaning of words, we expand not just our vocabulary, but our reality itself. Let's continue with crucifixion. In the modern mind, this word conjures images of torment, blood, and death. It is synonymous with pain and sacrifice. But this interpretation is a product of centuries of religious conditioning. In its original Latin form, crucifixio simply means to fix to a cross. But even this is misleading. The root of the word comes from crux, which means cross, but also crucible, a place of transformation. In ancient alchemy, the crucible was the vessel where base metals were purified into gold. It was not a place of destruction, but of refinement, elevation, and transcendence. The journey of the sacred oil. This perspective harmonizes with modern spiritual practices, particularly those rooted in Eastern traditions. In Kundalini Yoga, the ascent of spiritual energy up the spine mirrors the journey of the sacred oil. The chakras are crucibles of transformation, each one a mini crucifixion, a death of ignorance and a rebirth of wisdom. The crown chakra, located at the top of the skull, Golgotha, the place of the skull, is the final crucifixion, the point of divine realization. Even meditation is a form of crucifixion. It is the stilling of the mind, the crucifixion of thoughts and desires, allowing one to ascend into higher states of consciousness. In this state, one realizes their oneness with the divine, experiencing what the mystics call the kingdom of heaven within. This is the hidden teaching of the crucifixion, that within each of us lies the potential for divine realization. Christ's journey is our journey. His crucifixion is our initiation, our transformation, our elevation. The cross is not a symbol of death. It is the tree of life, the path to immortality. But this knowledge has been obscured over time, lost in translation, and buried beneath centuries of dogma. Yet it is there, hidden in the etymology of words, waiting to be discovered by those willing to look deeper. It is the secret of the Christos, the path to divine consciousness that lies within each of us. To truly grasp the hidden meaning of crucifixion as a process of spiritual elevation, we must journey back through history, weaving together threads from ancient traditions that seemingly have little in common at first glance. Yet, when examined closely, a fascinating pattern emerges: universal teaching about human potential and divine realization. The historical origin of these interpretations begins long before the advent of Christianity, in a world where spirituality and metaphysics were intertwined. In ancient Egypt, the cross appeared as the Ankh, symbolizing life and immortality. It was held by deities like Osiris and Isis, representing the union of masculine and feminine energies, the intersection of heaven and earth. The Ankh was not merely a religious symbol, but a key to understanding the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. But the connections run even deeper. The Taoist practice of Nei Dan, or internal alchemy, speaks of the golden flower, a mystical symbol of spiritual awakening. This flower blooms in the mind's eye, representing the blossoming of divine consciousness. In esoteric Christianity, this corresponds to the crown of thorns worn by Christ, symbolizing the activation of the crown chakra. In both traditions, the head is seen as the seat of divine consciousness, the place where human and divine merge. The crucifixion, then, can be seen as a metaphor for this internal alchemical process. The cross itself symbolizes the intersection of earthly and divine energies, just as the Taoist yin-yang represents the harmonious union of opposites. In both traditions, the goal is transcendence, the release from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Even the Gnostic interpretation of the crucifixion aligns with Taoist teachings. Gnostics believed in the existence of a divine spark within each person, trapped in the material world by ignorance and desire. The path to liberation was through gnosis, direct knowledge of the divine. In Taoism, this liberation is achieved through Wu Wei, the practice of non-action, where one aligns with the Tao, the universal flow of energy. Both teachings emphasize the death of the ego and the realization of one's true divine nature. Historical records suggest that these connections are not mere coincidences. During the early centuries of Christianity, the Silk Road facilitated cultural exchanges between the East and West. It is well documented that early Christian mystics traveled to the East, encountering Buddhist and Taoist teachings. Some scholars even suggest that Gnosticism itself was influenced by Eastern philosophies, particularly through the transmission of ideas from Indian and Chinese sages. This cultural exchange sheds light on why these mystical interpretations were suppressed by the Orthodox Church. In an effort to consolidate power, the Church sought to eliminate any teachings that emphasized personal divine realization, labeling them as heresy, not too different from what Constantine did. Yet these teachings survived in secret societies, passed down through alchemical texts and mystical traditions. Circling back to Carl Jung, he recognized this hidden lineage when he wrote about the psychological transformation symbolized by alchemy. Jung saw the crucifixion as an archetype of individuation, the integration of the conscious and unconscious mind. He even compared the Taoist golden flower to the alchemical philosopher's stone, both representing the culmination of spiritual enlightenment. These parallels invite us to reconsider the story of Christ's crucifixion. Could it be that this narrative is not about punishment or sacrifice, but about spiritual elevation? Could it be that the cross is not merely a symbol of death, but a symbol of divine union, the intersection of heaven and earth, yin and yang, human and divine? Taoist alchemy and Gnostic Christianity both teach that enlightenment is an inner journey, a crucifixion of the ego, and a resurrection of divine consciousness. They remind us that Christ's journey is our journey. His crucifixion is our transformation, our elevation. The cross is not an instrument of suffering, but a key to spiritual awakening, the tree of life within us. The sacred cross. In Hinduism, the cross represents the intersection of the physical and spiritual worlds, the union of the masculine and feminine energies. It is the bridge between heaven and earth, the axis mundi, the center of the cosmos. This is not a symbol of death. It is a symbol of divine union and enlightenment. But why would the story of crucifixion be interpreted as punishment? To understand this, we must explore the Gnostic perspective, an ancient belief system that predates Orthodox Christianity. The Gnostics saw Christ not as a sacrificial lamb, but as a spiritual teacher who demonstrated the path to divine realization. For them, the crucifixion was not about suffering. It was about transcending the material world. It was the ultimate initiation, the death of the ego, and the birth of the divine self. According to Gnostic teachings, Christ's crucifixion represents the crossing of the soul from the realm of matter to the realm of spirit. It is the moment of awakening where one realizes that they are not merely a body, but an immortal consciousness. This interpretation resonates with the teachings of ancient mystics like Plotinus, who spoke of the soul's journey from the material world to the One, the source of all creation. This interpretation is not new. It echoes the teachings of ancient alchemy, where crucifixion was seen as the process of purifying base elements into divine gold. It was the symbol of spiritual transformation, the merging of opposites, life and death, matter and spirit. This is the true meaning of the cross, the intersection of the human and the divine. The philosopher Heraclitus spoke of this union of opposites, saying, "The way up and the way down are one and the same." In this light, Christ's crucifixion is not about descending into death, but ascending into divine consciousness. It is the journey of the soul rising from the physical to the spiritual, from ignorance to enlightenment. Even the word salvation takes on new meaning when seen through this lens. In Latin, salvatio comes from salvus, meaning whole or unbroken. It is not about being saved from sin, but about becoming whole, integrating the human and the divine within oneself. This is the true resurrection, the awakening of Christ's consciousness within. The true meaning of the resurrection. On that same note, the resurrection is often seen as the ultimate miracle, the triumph of life over death. But when viewed through the lens of ancient wisdom and esoteric teachings, it becomes much more than a historical event. It is a symbol of spiritual awakening, the rebirth of consciousness within each of us. This interpretation is not meant to diminish its sacredness, but rather to expand our understanding of its significance. In the secret teachings preserved by mystics and sages, the resurrection symbolizes the awakening of the divine spark within. It is the process of rising above the limitations of the material world and entering a state of higher consciousness. This was not just the destiny of one man, but the potential of all humankind. The Christ figure in this sense represents the higher self, the divine essence waiting to be awakened within each of us. To understand this hidden meaning, we must first explore the concept of death as it was understood by ancient spiritual traditions. Death, in this context, is not merely the end of physical life, but the shedding of the ego, the false self. It is the release of attachments, fears, and limitations that keep us bound to the material realm. The tomb represents the state of spiritual gestation, a period of stillness and transformation. It is the place where the alchemical process of rebirth occurs. In the darkness of the tomb, the soul confronts its shadows and emerges purified, ready to ascend to higher realms of consciousness. This mirrors the process of spiritual awakening described in many mystical traditions, where one must go through the dark night of the soul before reaching enlightenment, and then, on the third day, the resurrection occurs. The number 3 is significant in esoteric teachings, symbolizing the union of body, mind, and spirit. It represents the completion of a cycle and the birth of a new state of being. The resurrection, therefore, is not just a return to life, but a transcendence of death, a movement into a higher dimension of existence. This interpretation aligns with the teachings of ancient mystery schools, which spoke of the initiation process as a symbolic death and rebirth. Initiates were said to die to their old selves and be reborn into a state of divine consciousness. In this sense, the resurrection is an allegory for the spiritual journey we all must undertake. But why was this deeper meaning hidden? Why was the resurrection taught as a literal event rather than a mystical experience? Some suggest it was to preserve the power of the priesthood, to keep spiritual knowledge in the hands of the few. Others believe it was to provide hope and comfort to the masses, to offer a promise of eternal life that could be easily understood. Yet for those with eyes to see and ears to hear, the truth remains. The resurrection is the ultimate symbol of spiritual liberation. It is the promise that no matter how dark the night, the dawn will come. No matter how deep the tomb, the soul will rise. This is the secret of the resurrection, the message that has been hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to rediscover. The secret of the Christos is that Christ's path is your path, his crucifixion your crucifixion, his resurrection your awakening. And the kingdom of heaven is not in some distant afterlife, but within you, waiting to be revealed. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.